What's going on, guys? It's Andrew here, bringing you the first episode of Fantasy Football Chat, brought to you by GroupCast Sports. I'm here with my boy Dalton.
What's going on, everyone?
And the way the series is going to work is we're going to go through position by position and look at the good and bad matchups for different teams and just analyze who we would start, who we would sit in both season-long and daily fantasy lineups. We're starting this a little late in the year for season-long fantasy, but for daily fantasy, the stakes are the same every week. And this is arguably the most important point of the season for season-long fantasy, as the playoffs are right around the corner, about 4 or 5 weeks away for most leagues. So it's time to grab those last few playoff spots that are available. So we're going to start off by looking at the quarterbacks for this week. Dalton, who do you like to see starting this week in the quarterback position?
Well, I like Kirk Cousins this week against the Lions. I think that's going to be a good game. I think Kirk Cousins is going to put up a decent amount of fantasy points. I think he'll put up about 25 fantasy points against the Lions defense. They haven't been looking too good lately, but the Lions offense has been looking pretty decent. I do think that Matthew Stafford is going to struggle against the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense has kind of been looking pretty bad the past few weeks. They look like they've been struggling, been making a few mistakes. But I think they're going to pick it up this week and shut down Matthew Stafford, possibly.
Yeah, this game is also in Minnesota, so that the environment in that dome will definitely help the Vikings after the way they played fairly poor against the Saints on Sunday night. A lot of people expected it to be a very close game, but it really wasn't. The score may say it was, but the Saints really just were the better team, flat out. Kirk Cousins underperformed, throwing interceptions, fumbles. I believe, he threw a pick six. He fumbled once, almost twice, but it got called back. But for this week, I do look to him for a rebound. I think he's projected to go around 21, 22 points, and I could see him possibly getting a little bit over that mark even. And I believe his price for daily fantasy is about around the range of the fifth quarterback. I have him on DraftKings, looks like 6,200, FanDuel 8,300. So fairly priced if you want to pay up for your quarterbacks. However, this week I'm looking a little lower, and I'm actually going to go with the quarterback on the other side of the field on this one, Matthew Stafford. After last week's performance, I think he'll come back a lot stronger this week. He did, however, just lose his number one target, Golden Tate, which I'm not sure what the Lions were looking for there by trading him away. But we saw the absolute revival of Marvin Jones last week, catching 2 touchdowns after having one on the entire season. But we saw Kenny Golladay just disappear. And now with Golden Tate out of the picture, those two will really shine, especially in this game against Minnesota's struggling secondary right now. And another quarterback I'm looking at, I know we discussed this one earlier, Cam Newton against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's obvious. He had one of his best games of the season last week against the Ravens. He absolutely tore them apart. He threw for over 200 yards, and obviously he ran for some. I believe he put up nearly 30 fantasy points. And the ceiling this week for Cam Newton is as high as any quarterback. He's projected around 24, and I could see him shattering that by possibly 10 points against this absolutely atrocious Buccaneers secondary.
Right, and another one that I would like to point out that might not be a popular – well, it would be probably a popular opinion, but most people probably don't look as far as this, but Alex Smith against the Falcons.
Yeah, it's the Falcons defense, obviously. It's up there with the Buccaneers, one of the worst, battered by injuries. Really just nothing in the secondary worth anything, honestly. And that'd be a good play this week. Alex Smith, and then a couple other guys that are notable. Obviously, you play Mahomes every week. You have him. Brady and Aaron Rodgers will be probably a shootout game, just throwing the ball back and forth.
Since we're real quick, while we're on the topic of quarterbacks, how do you feel about Deshaun Watson this week against the Denver Broncos?
Watson.
Last week, Patrick Mahomes absolutely shredded the Denver Broncos defense, putting up 303 yards with 4 touchdowns. How do you think Deshaun Watson is going to play against the Broncos defense? Keep in mind that they play at Denver.
At Denver, yes. So,
how do you think that he will perform this week?
I'm staying away from Deshaun Watson this week. I don't necessarily trust it. He's still battling injuries. Against this Denver defense, they couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes. But then again, who has stopped Patrick Mahomes this year? I don't think anyone has. It's not a fair comparison to make. Now, Deshaun Watson's coming off a 32-point fantasy week against the Miami Dolphins. But going to Denver, playing at Denver in that cold weather where it'll possibly be snowing, we never know, in the Mile High City, I'm staying away from Deshaun Watson this week. Another quarterback you got to stay away from is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, everyone is hyping this up and about Fitzpatrick coming back. And don't get me wrong, I think Fitzpatrick is the better option compared to Jameis Winston. But I don't trust either of them against the Carolina Panthers defense.
Right. You want to talk about bus or sleepers this week?
I mean, if you're looking in daily fantasy for a sleeper, I would say Dak Prescott is low price. He'll get you rushing yards. Don't expect him to score 30 points, but he'll get the job done this week against Tennessee. Russell Wilson's another one. Had a great week last week. The Chargers defense is good, but Russell Wilson's still he's an elite quarterback. He's been in the league long enough. He's going to put up points for you. Now, Derek Carr, he could be a sleeper. He had a good week, his first good week of the year last week. But you just never know. The Raiders are not good. It's not something I would want to be a part of. And Ben Roethlisberger, 100% no this week at Baltimore. Baltimore's defense has looked terrible the past 2 weeks. They have to turn it around if they want to win this division. And I believe this will be the week they do so. At Baltimore, Roethlisberger will struggle.
Right. One more thing that I would like to talk about, though, is I think C.J. Beathard is a sleeper this week if he plays. He's questionable right now. They play against Oakland. They play at home. I feel like he might put up a decent amount of fantasy points.
Yeah, anyone playing against Oakland has a chance to go off. Defense is not very good. He's also a very cheap option if you're looking daily fantasy wise. So that'd be a good pick for anyone that wants to stack their lineup with running backs and wide receivers.
All right.
Speaking of running backs, we're moving on to the next position. And the number one running back for this week, undoubtedly, is Christian McCaffrey.
Right. That's my pick for this week. That will be the best start out of out of your options. Obviously, Ty Gurley's a start. Kamara, I'm not so sure about him. Kamara's always a start, but they play against the Rams. James Conner is definitely he's always a start too, but they play the Ravens.
Even like against the Ravens,
they're playing at home. They're playing at Baltimore, so it's going to be difficult.
Season long, obviously, you're going to start all these guys. You're going to start Conner. You're going to start Gurley. That's a given. But if you're looking past that, maybe you're looking for a flex spot in a small league, or you're looking into daily fantasy, McCaffrey's your guy this week. He's going for around 8K on FanDuel. No, I'm sorry, on DraftKings. So that's as good as a pick as you're going to see this week.
Right, and another thing, they're playing at home this week.
Yes, it's Carolina. Any player for Carolina this week is a good option against the Buccaneers. McCaffrey's going to catch touchdowns. He's going to run them. He's just going to tear apart the Buccaneers defense. Another running back. It's a given start, but if you're looking for daily fantasy, Kareem Hunt at the Browns.
Obviously, that's a good pick.
The ceiling is high.
Been putting up great numbers this year. He started off kind of slow, I think.
Yeah, first 2 or 3 weeks, people were worried about him, but not anymore.
Yeah. The only thing that I think you would have to worry about is that they're not playing at home, which I don't really see that being that much of a problem.
At Cleveland shouldn't be a problem.
Shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. Kareem Hunt, another start this week, right behind Christian McCaffrey. Another person that I was looking at would be Adrian Peterson against the Falcons.
Yeah. The Falcons, obviously, another defense that's just non-existent. Peterson's been picking up lately, has a couple good games stringed together. I wouldn't be surprised if he has another one this week. My sleeper for the running back group, I've been looking forward to this one, Isaiah Crowell. He is a very low price on daily fantasy, and people forget he is a top 15 running back this year. He's going for 4,200 on DraftKings. Ridiculously low, considering what he has the potential to do to this Miami defense this week.
All right. I have a sleeper as well. He's on my fantasy team. I'm expecting big things of him this week. It's Dion Lewis against the Dallas Cowboys. They play at Dallas, but I believe Dion Lewis is overdue for another big game. Haven't heard much from the Cowboys this year. The Cowboys haven't really been playing to the best of their ability. The only thing that I honestly just don't see any way that Dion Lewis doesn't perform well this week.
Yeah, he's a good pass catcher back, and that's usually what the Titans resort to. They just dump the ball off a lot.
Let me clear this up real quick. He looks like a good pick in PPR leagues.
Yes, definitely PPR. He's going to get you some receptions. Hopefully he gets in the end zone. That would just put it over the edge for the most part. But the Dallas defense, they're on and off for the most part. You have to watch them. It really depends on the game. But Dion Lewis, not a bad play this week. Some of the other running backs that you're going to want to play this week, obviously, Kenyon Drake has a good matchup against the Jets. Melvin Gordon at the Seahawks. A lot of people are worried about that one. He's coming back from the injury. If he's healthy, he plays. It's that simple. He's one of the best backs in the league. Kamara against the Rams, once again, if he plays, you start him. You don't bench one of the best running backs in the league because you're worried about a matchup. Now, another player that you have to watch for this week is Sony Michel coming off his ankle injury.
Right.
He's missed 2 games, I believe, and they're going to be playing Sunday night against the Packers. James White has shown out the past weeks without Michel. Even with Michel, he's been one of the top 10 backs in the league this year, pass catching wise. So James White and Sony Michel, if they're both healthy, they both start. I would probably stay away from Tevin Coleman this week. The Redskins are somehow winning games. They're finding ways to win. The Falcons are finding ways to lose. So I'm staying away from Tevin Coleman. I'm staying away from Kerryon Johnson at the Vikings. And Nick Chubb, I'm hesitant to start this week against the Chiefs. But that's one of those borderline, if you need a flex kind of guy, I would probably put him over most receivers.
All right. Now that we've gone over our running backs, I think it's time to move on to the wide receivers. This week, I'm not so sure about wide receivers this week. Of course, you have your obvious picks like Thielen and Hill and DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs even this week. Antonio Brown is playing against the Ravens at the Ravens, but Antonio Brown's always a start. You never bench him unless it's a bye week. It's the only reason you should ever take him off your lineup. Cooper Kupp had an MCL injury. He didn't tear it. He just strained it. He should be coming back. It was said that he was coming back this week to play. Not sure if he's gonna get any touches. Not sure if he's gonna see the field, but he is supposed to.
Yes, he's believed to be active this week for the game.
Personally, I have him on my fantasy team. I'm not starting him this week, mainly because I do not know if they're going to play him. I don't want them to play him, if I'm being honest. I don't want him to get hurt again. Don't want to make his injury any worse than it already is. Mm-hmm. I think they just need to wait before they play him. Give it one more week.
It is a big game. They do want to win this one. I understand that, but at this point, you're 9-0. More than likely, your playoff spot is clinched. Don't rush back one of your star players. I agree completely. And I actually have a question for you. What receiver leads the league in touchdown receptions right now?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure who
Antonio Brown. And he's done it very quietly this year. You haven't heard much about Antonio Brown. He has 8 touchdowns, followed by Tyreek Hill, who has 7, and Eric Ebron, who also has 7. Yeah, I was a little caught off guard when I figured that out.
Yeah,
because it's been very quiet this year.
But of course, Antonio Brown's he puts up great fantasy points every
week.
Every week. Oh, there's some kind of like a fire truck or emergency vehicle going by my house, so just ignore that real quick. But he's putting up great fantasy points. He averages 21.3 points
in PPR.
In the league. In PPR.
Yeah. So my start of the week for wide receivers has to be Jarvis Landry at Kansas City. Kansas City secondary has been very poor this year. Baker Mayfield's favorite target is Jarvis Landry. He catches high volume of receptions. Touchdowns haven't been there, but they will get there. And I really think Landry's a good play for both. He'd make a good wide receiver 2 this week, maybe even a low-end wide receiver 1, and he's a great play on daily fantasy this week.
Right.
Along with, I'm starting Michael Thomas in daily fantasy. He's worth the price. I believe he's $7,600 this week. And Emmanuel Sanders. He is now the sole number 1 wideout in Denver with Demaryius Thomas gone. Cortland Sutton will be the number 2. Another good sleeper to watch for and pick up in your 10, 12-man leagues. So that's a team you have to watch for moving forward. Denver's receivers. Case Keenum, not the best quarterback, not always who you want throwing the ball to your fantasy receivers, but he gets the job done. And the receivers make plays when he's throwing.
Well, okay, so my sleeper for this week, we talked about this a little bit before. I started to think he's not going to perform this week. I don't think he will. But the more that I look into it, the more that I listen to what you had to say about it, I started to agree with you. Jordy Nelson is a
100%. Jordy Nelson should be a start this week. Flex
you
spot.
You think he's a start this week? A definite start.
A definite start. If you're in a 10, 12-man league with a need a flex because you have T.Y. Hilton on a bye like I do, or just any of your receivers, running backs on a bye. Saquon Barkley, Odell, Sterling Shepard. If you need to fill that spot, Jordy Nelson, a good 1 week stream with this matchup
for this 49ers. Week because the past 3 weeks he had a bye week 7, but the past 3 weeks he was putting up 2, maybe 3 fantasy points, which is not looking anything like his week 3, week 4, and week 5, which he was putting. Week 3 he put up around 30 fantasy points, and then week 4 and week 5 he put up around 15. So I mean, maybe this week there's a high possibility that he can turn himself around. Maybe.
I like the matchup he'll have in the slot. Hopefully Sherman will be guarding Martavius Bryant, so that'll leave Jordy Nelson with whoever he wants to run past. Like I said earlier, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., both good options this week now that Golden Tate is out of the picture. Danny Amendola against the Jets is another good one, low-price receiver for daily. And
I was going to mention that.
Mainly probably a waiver pickup for most leagues. Traquan Smith of the New Orleans Saints will probably have a big day. Drew Brees tends to throw to his number 2 and number 3 receivers in big games. So you'll see a lot of Alvin Kamara, Traquan Smith, a little less Michael Thomas this week, I believe. Michael Crabtree against the Steelers, I believe that's a good play this week. The Ravens need this win if they want to stay in the division picture with the Bengals. So I look for them to play hard football this week, and they will go out there and get the win. Now, sleeper pick wise, DJ Moore is going to have a big week against the Buccaneers. And not many people know who he is yet. He was the Panthers' first-round draft pick. He had a touchdown last week, and I look for him to get another one this week. It's only his second game of the year. He's been battling injury all season, but he's definitely a good daily fantasy play. And once again, if you're looking for someone to fill that flex spot this week, DJ Moore is a great option.
Right. So I think it's time to move on to tight ends. And tight ends this week, not so sure about tight ends this week.
Tight ends every week, who's sure at this point? The one thing you can be sure about, start Travis Kelce. And I wish I could say you're sure about Gronk, but sometimes you're just not anymore.
Gronk. We were talking about in our little group chat that we have, O.J. Howard.
O.J. Howard is definitely a good play this week. That does not mean he's a good option for the rest of the year. But if you're looking for tight ends, daily fantasy, or maybe you have Evan Ingram on a bye, Ebron, Jack Doyle, all on buys, 3 of the top tight ends. Yeah, I'm looking towards O.J. Howard and David Njoku, also the Cleveland. You know, last week a lot of people were thinking Njoku was going to have a breakout game. Got 0 targets. No fantasy points at whatsoever. And it was devastating for those of us who used him on daily fantasy. But I'm sticking with him one more week. Low price tight end, 4,600 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. The ceiling is high. Kansas City's defense is poor. It's just a good matchup for him this week.
What about Trey Burton this week against the Bills?
Trey Burton. It's going to end up depending on who guards Trey Burton. The Bills did a very good job of shutting down Gronkowski on Monday night. I watched the whole game. They did not allow the tight end to get involved, which obviously Gronk and Trey Burton, 2 different levels of tight ends. They probably won't be double and triple teaming Trey Burton. So he has the chance to have a big game like he did against the Patriots. But you don't want to play whoever Tre'Davious White is guarding. He is an outstanding cornerback, and he's just not allowing many catches this year, and most quarterbacks aren't even bothering to throw his way anymore. So just be wary about starting Trey Burton. Jordan Reed's a good option this week, though, against the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I'm starting him this week.
Yeah, Greg Olsen against the Buccaneers. George Kittle against the Raiders. All good options. Jared Cook is a great option for daily fantasy at San Francisco. Probably Derek Carr's favorite target, I would say. And so that's a good play. And then my sleeper for the tight end group this week, Benjamin Watson of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on that one.
As I said, Drew Brees likes to throw to not his best receivers. And Benjamin Watson fits that category perfectly. He will be the touchdown guy against the Rams. When they get those goal line plays, Benjamin Watson will be the one catching the touchdowns. Either that or the fullback, like Drew Brees loves to do to fantasy owners.
Well, now that we've gone through our tight ends, we're going to skip the flex, right?
Yeah.
Or are we going to want to talk?
I've covered some flex options. If you're deep leagues, look DJ Moore, Nick Chubb if he hasn't been picked up, all those kind of guys, just low end guys with good matchups for this week. So we'll talk about defenses real quick. Best defense to play this week is going to be probably the Carolina Panthers against Tampa Bay. I understand. People are excited. It's Fitzpatrick. Fitzmagic is back. His MVP campaign's restarting. No, it's not. We saw Fitzpatrick's true colors in his last start. 4 interceptions, I believe, all in the first half. The Buccaneers just don't have a good quarterback. The Panthers do have a good defense. It's the perfect start for this week.
Wouldn't say this was a sleeper. Wouldn't say this is like one of the best picks, but the Ravens defense against Pittsburgh.
Ravens defense, top 5 defense, been very disappointing the past 2 weeks. Pretty sure for a combined -6 points over the last 2 weeks, and I have started them for both weeks. So, but I'm still starting them again. The Steelers offense, Big Ben tends to struggle when playing at Baltimore. And I'll look for him to do the same this week in a big division game. Baltimore will show up after being bullied the last 2 weeks. But the start for defenses, Chicago Bears at Buffalo. At this point, when you're picking a defense in fantasy, the first thing everyone does is run to see if the team that plays Buffalo is available on the waiver wire. I do it every week, and they almost never are. But when they are, that's who you want to play. Because Chicago, they're getting Khalil Mack back, and Roquan Smith has been dominating offensive lines. And Buffalo, well, it's Buffalo. Who knows who their starting quarterback's going to be? Peterman's benched. Josh Allen's hurt. You're left with Derek Anderson.
Nobody.
Derek Anderson.
No.
Who he did somehow throw a touchdown on the Patriots defense last night, but it's not going to happen often, and the Bears have a great defense already. So
he's already doing better than Nathan Peterman.
Nathan Peterman's thrown more touchdowns to opposing teams than he's completed passes. Fun fact. Another defense that you could look to start is actually the Jets or the Dolphins. I see this being a really low-scoring game. Both really poor offenses. Sam Darnold has been struggling. Brock Osweiler is Brock Osweiler. And I don't see either of these offenses scoring too many points. And the Denver Broncos against Houston. Broncos have played well against teams that weren't the Chiefs. So you could always start the Denver defense against Houston with Watson battling injuries, and they don't have Will Fuller anymore. So as long as they can slow down DeAndre Hopkins, you can pretty much slow down the whole offense.
Real quick, I'm going to do a run through of some defenses that you should not start this week. That includes the Rams defense, the Saints defense, the Texans defense. I would also probably not start the
Seahawks,
the Steelers defense or the Seahawks defense. Patriots defense, Green Bay defense, Bills defense, obviously, and quite possibly, I would go as far as to say not to start the Chiefs defense.
The Chiefs defense has struggled. They're projected to get like 6 to 7 points this week, which I don't know that they've done all year. But, with the Browns firing their head coach, offensive coordinator, I'm not even sure who's calling plays this week. Baker Mayfield is going to probably have a little bit of freedom to do what he wants, and I think he will perform better in this kind of environment with no pressure on him. No one's really expecting him to show out this week without a head coach, without an offensive coordinator that he's familiar with. But for the majority of it, there's a lot of defenses that you usually start that you want to avoid this week.
Oh yeah, this week is a bad time for defenses. A lot of bad matchups for these defenses that honestly, if you don't have any of the options that you listed off, or if you're not able to pick up any of those defenses that were on your start or sleeper category, I think it might just be best for you just not to start a defense this week.
The last 2 weeks, maybe even 3, I've had defenses go in the negative. So, sometimes it is better to just let them sit.
0 is better than -6.
That's true. All right, now we'll just touch on kickers really briefly. Justin Tucker obviously start. Zerloin, Butker, Matt Bryant, all starts. Gostkowski. Now, what you want to look at is who not to play this week. Mason Crosby. A lot of people are all over him this week against the Patriots. I don't see it. I'm staying away from Crosby. I'm staying away from Fairbairn, and I'm staying away from Steven Hauschka. They all have tough matchups. Likely not going to be many points scored, and likely not going to be many field goal opportunities at all. So I would stay away from that group of kickers. I'd be a little hesitant about Matt Prater and Robbie Gould. Robbie Gould might get some opportunities against Oakland, but likely there's going to be more touchdowns than field goal opportunities. So
I'm going to go ahead and drop Fairbairn and pick up
I'm going with Matt Prater this week. Might not be the best option, but that's who I got. That's who I'm sticking with. Obviously, Grino, Gostkowski, Will Lutz, all those definite starts. Kicker position's not too complicated, and the majority of it is luck. Whoever you start, you hope that goes off. There's no algorithm to figuring out who the best kicker is for a certain week.
You just have to hope.
Just kind of put people in your lineup and hope they can get you 7-8 points. All right, well, that's all we have for today's fantasy football chat. If you have any topics that you want us to cover in the next episode, be sure to let us know, or any specific questions you have, make sure to tweet at us at GroupCast Sports. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, as this is where we'll be posting weekly episodes of Fantasy Football Chat, along with other series that are related to GroupCast Sports. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.